Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 11, Part 1, Enter the Duke. Hannibal stood in the recreation room of his embassy and tried to display patience. He'd wanted to go out and properly meet the Duke at the spaceport, but that couldn't be done. Not when the man wasn't supposed to officially arrive yet. He grabbed a drink off the table and moved to a cluster of his staff. They made room for him, and one asked, "Is he really coming in on a commercial freighter?" Hannibal nodded to her. "Remember, Duke Laszlo Felderin is not officially here yet. His personal ship is sitting in the dark outside the system. He's coming in with the rest of his bodyguards and personal retainers, but wants it kept quiet for now. Officially, he is just one of the executives of Alincor, here to negotiate trade deals, protection deals, and tariff concessions with humans, Arabso, Feindel, and maybe a few others. That story is helpful since it is true. He sits on the board of that company and regularly takes part in negotiations for them. I thought the royals didn't involve themselves directly in companies. They do when they found the company themselves. Alincor is a conglomerate. The Duke started because he wanted certain charities to exist. He then used it to start production on certain goods that he didn't like us being dependent on outsiders for, and then to start a mercenary company to protect the other two." A new voice chimed in from behind him. "Well, that's the official story. The truth is that I had some fundamental differences of opinion with Her Royal Majesty's High Command about priorities of protection and had to choose between pulling out the royal card or leaving." Hannibal managed not to spew champagne through his nostrils nor spill his drink, and even kept both feet on the ground. How did he get in here so quietly? Wait, the way he said, "Her Royal Majesty's." He and Henry are going to get on well. Maybe a little too well. "Oh, my queen. What have you done?" He painted his best smile on his face and turned to find someone's shoulder. He took a slight step back and craned his neck to look up into the face he'd seen on vids and pics. The man gave him a conspiratorial wink and then continued. "It took a little time, and I had to convince the Queen to give me dispensation. But Alincor has been a boon to the Empire in a number of ways. I am not involved in the day-to-day operation of the company, nor its subsidiaries of course, but I do keep regular tabs on its activities. Sometimes preventing the execs from trying to skirt the Queen's law feels like a full-time job in and of itself." Duke Felderin smiled ruefully and shook his head. "But I have entirely forgotten my manners. Please all of you forgive me. I can see by your expressions that you recognize me. Now, let me have a look at all of you and see how I do. Let's see. You must be Joe Cole. The deep blue of your skin tone gives it away. I know you are the only Southern Reaches person here. And you be Garand, correct?" The Duke gave the man a quick wink. "I saw you hiding your hand, so I couldn't see the scars. So you have figured out that I've read your files. Now, the game gets fun. Then, you two lovely ladies have to be the twins, Lilina and Honor. Wait, don't tell me. You are Lilina. Oh, no, you don't, I'm right. And you both know it. I saw the look of surprise. And no, it wasn't a lucky guess." One of the two women who flanked the Duke elbowed him in the ribs hard enough that Inbile heard it. He just laughed and continued. "Okay, it was mostly not a lucky guess. Oh, you want to know how?" He winked again and wiggled his eyebrows. "State secret. I won't tell. I'm guessing you're Condas, the chief accountant. Good to meet you. My accountants went through the books for this place as a matter of course, and were pleased. That is high praise, by the way. They rarely find most of their peers' work so much as acceptable." Hannibal watched each face light up as he worked through their little group. Yes, he and Henry are going to get on far too well. Or kill each other, but I expect the former. The Duke then gave him a glance and flashed another of those conspiratorial winks, then turned to one of the interns who had stopped outside the circle to listen. "And of course, last and most, you must be the Ambassador Hannibal I have heard so much about." The Duke extended his hand to the youth, who stood there completely poleaxed, eyes wide and shaking in his boots. Laszlo reached out to grab the youngster's hand and shook it vigorously. "I have to say I'm very pleased to meet you. Hey, I heard you are a fair hand with a practice sword, right? How about we spar a couple of rounds?" The poor lad was now visibly shaking, his eyes darting around for an out. The Duke put an arm around the young man's shoulders and made to move off with him, but the other woman who had been flanking him spoke up. Her tones, those of mock exasperation.
"Oh, come off of it, Kassler. This kid is obviously not going to find his tongue, and if you push him any farther, he may faint on you."
Inibal suppressed a smile as the woman gently took the bewildered young man by the arm, whispered something into his ear, pointed him towards the food, and sent him off with a slight bit of pressure on his back. He turned away from the intern to find that the living mountain of the Duke standing next to him with his hand out. He took the offered hand and shook it, while the Duke beamed a smile at him.
"Ambassador Enbel Pensar, it is a pleasure to finally meet the man I keep hearing about. I have to say that I am impressed with your work here. Now, about that sword practice."
Enibal felt a surge of ice run from his neck to his toes, and his eyes went wide. The Duke got an amused look in his eye, and he brought himself under control. "Oh, you think that's funny, do you? I can give as good as I can get." He gave the man his best eye roll, and spoke in his best mock humility tone of voice.
"I am afraid that I have no skill with the blade, or any other weapon really, as His Grace well knows. However, if His Grace is so weak in his self-opinion or assessment of his skills that His Grace wishes to trounce a defenseless ambassador with a stick, despite praising that ambassador's efforts, it would be my duty to oblige."
He hung his head slightly in a mock bow and spread his hands a little away from his sides. Micro-expressions of shock and amusement flashed across the Duke's face, while the three women with him giggled. "Wait, free? Where did the third one? Oh, she is a quiet one, I see." The Duke tried to look severely at him over the insult, but third woman slid in beside the Duke, slid her hand into the crook of his elbow, and spoke in amused tones.
"I do think he got the better of you on that one, dear."
The woman who had elbowed the Duke put a hand on his shoulder, leaned in, looked up at him with an affectionate smile, and spoke.
"And you have no one but yourself to blame."
The third woman giggled and gave the Duke a peck on the cheek.
"Too true. Sis did warn you after all."
Kassler rolled his eyes in exaggerated exasperation, then threw his head back and bellowed a laugh while he put his arms around the two women at his sides. Inibal felt himself smile at the man, partly in bewilderment at his behavior and partly at that of the women. The Duke leveled an amused gaze at him, then spoke.
"Touché, Enibal. Well played. You may profess to be disarmed, but I am happy to see your rapier wit is as sharp coming off your tongue as it is off the tip of the pen. Verbal sparring is another fun game to play, and I get the feeling we are going to have plenty of opportunities to spar together in the coming months. But my manners seem to have escaped me in the excitement."
He extricated himself from the two women's hold, then turned toward the one who had elbowed him. Enibal tried to get his mind to catch up with events, and finally took a look at the woman. She was stunningly beautiful, from the blue sheen of her skin to her large, expressive eyes. He looked at the other two and saw that they were a match for her, even the shorter one, who seemed a little shy and wore glasses. Glasses? In this day and age. What has she got that they can't correct? The Duke spoke.
"These three women, aside from being the most beautiful women in all the Empire."
All three women giggled, rolled their eyes, and gave him a sharp look as if they disapproved of his statement, but had the faintest hint of a blush and a smile pulling at the corners of their lips as the Duke continued.
"Are my three wives? This."
He held out the hand of the shorter woman first.
"Is Lady Yoro Sela Feldarin the most intelligent woman in the kingdom?"
Enibal shook the offered hand and looked the woman in the eye. Once he saw past her glasses and the slightly dressed-down attire she'd chosen, he could see the beauty her husband had described. She smiled slightly to him, and he felt like he could see the deep intellect hiding behind those deep eyes. He brought himself back to the present, and for a moment, he feared he'd offend the Duke, but the man just smiled in approval and continued.
"And this is Lady Ainor Kendo Feldarin, who can cook better than any master chef and tends to be prime mother to our brood of children."
Enibal moved to take her hand, but she held it out palm down instead of sideways. He tried to grasp it for a shake anyway, but she moved her hand so that he had her fingers, then so that it was nearly in front of his face. She made another move, and he made the mistake of looking her in the eyes. Her eyes were a deep orange, which set off the blue of her skin perfectly. They danced with amusement and seemed to dare him both to back away and kiss her hand. In for a drop, in for the river. He lowered their hands so that he could bow properly over it, kept his eyes locked on hers, put his best salty look into them, grinned slightly, and brushed his lips to the back of her hand. She gave a soft chuckle and wiggled her eyebrows at him, then turned to the Duke.
I think I like this one, dear. Can we keep him?
Inibal snapped back to himself and realized how he'd just flirted with the wife of a royal. He straightened quickly and looked at the Duke to find an already familiar look of amusement on his face as he answered his wife.
Now, I think my sister might have something to say if you spirited off her prized ambassador, my darling.
Inibal took an involuntary step back. Polygamous marriages were more common than not in the Empire, and not all of them were exclusive. Getting tangled in one could cause complications, however, particularly with the wife of a noble. Caught as spit, what do I do now?